Now starting part 2 of our tutorial on buttons and movie clips. We have our first set of movie clips in place, and we now want to use some buttons to help navigate through our site. We're going to start by putting some other symbols on our site though. So on our fifth frame, in the symbols layer, we're going to unlock that now. In our fifth frame, we're going to right click and we're going to choose Insert Blank Keyframe. Insert Blank Keyframe. And we do that, we see the difference between our blank keyframe and our regular keyframe. Regular keyframe is dark, and a blank keyframe is an open circle. And by putting in a blank keyframe, it sets it up for change, but it removes the object that was there before, which happens to be all these stars. So we now have a blank canvas to work with, but we're ready to put a new symbol on here. In this case, it's not going to be an animated symbol, it's just going to be a straight up object, just a regular circle. And we'll pick a different color. And I'll quickly put a circle on here. I'm going to go to my 10th frame, insert another blank keyframe on my 10th frame, and put in a square. And again, we're working for speed here. You don't have to make it pretty. There's nothing important here. You're not getting a mark for how pretty it looks. Just get a circle and a square onto these frames. For our 15th frame, we'll just insert a regular frame, not a keyframe, not a blank keyframe, just a regular frame so it stays as our static square. We now want to go back to our first layer and we want to add a button to this layer. So we're just going to create our own button. We're going to use the rectangle tool. I'll just set it to a light gray color with black text, and I'll just put it down here in the bottom corner. So it's going to be a light gray button. I'll choose my text tool. Make sure I've got a font that's going to fit here. I'll probably have to make this a bit smaller. I click in here and I'm just going to type start. And you can see it's the same color, so I'm going to select it and make sure it's black. There we go. And I can actually make that a bit bolder than that. Maybe a little bit bigger as well. There we go, it's pretty good. And then I'm just going to line that up a little bit better. Use my arrow keys, make it look good. Work better anyways. Good enough. And then I'm going to select both that text and that rectangle in the back. I'm going to right click and choose Convert to Symbol. So the first time we did this, we used the Insert New Symbol. This time we're using Convert to Symbol. Either way is perfectly effective. We're just seeing two different ways to do the same task. So when we made our stars, we used the Insert New Symbol. In this case, we have something on stage. We're going to convert it to a symbol instead, but we could go either way for this task. And this is going to be our start button. So we want to make sure we choose button as our type for it. Right? So make sure it's a button type and click OK. Right? So now this button we've got here, when we double click on it, we see we get a new timeline with an upstate, an overstate, a down, and a hit. Remember, those are our three potential states of the button, and the hit has to do with where we click on the button. In our upstate, we're going to leave it the way it is, but in our overstate, we want it to change. We want to have it change color a little bit. So that requires us to put in a keyframe, not a blank keyframe. If we put a blank keyframe in like this, it removes everything. We don't want that. We want to have a regular keyframe, so regular insert keyframe, and that's going to allow us to then click on this gray area and choose a new color. So I'll choose it to this bright red color. And then for my downstate, I want to look like it's being pressed. So I'm going to put another keyframe in there, insert keyframe, and make sure both parts are selected. And grab my scale tool and shrink those down. Not a lot, just a little bit. For my hit frame, I'm just going to insert a regular frame. Right? So there's my three states of my button along with my hit. Go back to scene 1 here. So if I was to now test this button out, Command Enter, right? You see that as we mouse over it, sure enough, it changes, right? And when we click on it, we can see that it depresses. It doesn't do anything yet. We haven't got any code on it yet. Right. Now I do have one problem with my text on my button here. I'm going to show you what it is. So when I go into my layer 1 here and I click on my start text, you can see it says dynamic text. That should be static text. So make sure when you work with yours that it's set to static text. And if it's not, just make sure you set it back. There we go. Oops. Okay, so now we want our button to actually operate, so we need to put some code on our button itself. So I'm going to right click on the actual button here on the stage and choose from this list Actions. So when that opens up, it tells us our current selection is now Start Button, which is exactly what we want. Now, buttons require us to tell them how we want them to operate. That's called handling. And in the case of a button, we always use on to set up our handling. So it's a movie clip control thing. So when we click on that, we see that there's an on in here. And if you do it wrong, you will get an error message that says, you need to use an on, or you can't use an on. For instance, when we put something on a frame, we can't use the on terminology. It only works for buttons. So we'll double click on that and we see we get on with our brackets for parameters. And here's the different parameters we can have for buttons. And you'll recognize a lot of these: press, release, releasing outside, rolling over. So it depends what we want to actually have operate. The most common one is release. It gives people the chance to abort if they don't actually want to follow through with the click. So I'll double click on release and it puts release inside my parameter set. So this is our way of telling Flash how we want the button to operate. I then need to move my cursor inside the curly Q area here, the curly bracket set, to actually get it to operate with some sort of code. In this case, we're going to go back to our functions here. We want timeline control, and we want the opposite of stop. We want to do a play. So I'll click on play, and there's my play command with its open and closed brackets and its semicolon. We can check this with our blue checkbox. We should always do that. And we should get 0 errors, 0 warnings. That looks good to me. We'll hit our command enter. There's our stars spinning. And we click on our start button. We should see it progress. We will have one issue in that it just flies right through everything. See that? It doesn't stop anywhere because we only have one stop command. We only have the stop command on the first frame. We need stop commands on all our frames, or at least our 3 different frames we have here. Right? So we need a stop command here and we need a stop command here to be able to control this better. So when we look at our actions layer, we can see the little letter A in here, and this tells us there's an action on that frame, and that was the first stop action we had. We want to do the same things for this frame and this frame. So I'm going to right click, choose actions. Right? Oops. Helps if I put a keyframe in there first. You need a blank keyframe first. Then choose actions. Actions frame 5 it says, which is excellent. There's my stop command. Bingo, done. Right, I'll click back here again, and I'm just going to show you that error that came up when I didn't put a keyframe in. It didn't really know what to do with it. So when I ask for actions, you'll notice it says current selection cannot, and I'll open this up a little bit further, have actions applied to it. So that tells us we have a problem. And then immediately I knew that what my problem was, which was I needed to have a keyframe here. So insert blank keyframe. Right click, actions, and then stop again. So when we run it this time, we see our stars working. We click on our start button, it's going to go to our circle, but it's going to stop. It's not going to progress any further. Now we have no way to get to square from this point. We would need another button for that. But we can see that we've progressed and we've stopped. Right? So the timeline is run from this point to this point, and here is sitting at this spot right here. Right there it was sitting at the spot right there, waiting for further instructions. We're going to stop this part now, and we'll start part 3 in a moment.